Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome from the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, Jeff Holland.
Thank you. Wow. Well, welcome to our special session on the Solutions Initiative. When we planned this, we thought that if we got 40 people or so, this would be a success. So, well, I guess mission accomplished. Don't leave. We haven't even started yet. Let me give you a little background about this. So the Solutions Initiative was an effort to find some answers to the questions people have been asking. So we've talked a lot about the problem. Now it's time to talk about what some of the solutions are. And the good news is that we have many solutions available to us. So we convened a group of 7 think tanks from various ideologies to discuss how they would stabilize the debt in the future. To make sure we were evaluating them all on a standardized basis, we also contracted with Barry Anderson, former acting director of CBO, and Eric Toder from the Tax Policy Center, to make sure that everyone was being evaluated on an equal basis. So Barry and Eric are actually going to come out first, and they're going to talk about what they witnessed what they saw in terms of areas of agreement and disagreement. And they'll give you a little context, some history, because this is the 4th time we've done this initiative, and they've been participating in all of them. After that, I'll come back on stage with our representatives from the 7 institutions, and we'll talk a little bit about some specifics among those areas of agreement and disagreement. And then after that, you see some tables around. We're going to have a breakout session. So this is our first attempt at an interactive session where the audience will have a chance to go and talk to the individuals who are representing the organizations to find out about the plans that they put together. We'll then reconvene after that and have sort of a share-back session so that everyone can sort of discuss what they found interesting about this project, either about the individual initiatives, the individual plans, or about the initiative as a whole. So with that, let me turn it over to Barry and Eric, who will start this discussion off. Thank you.
Well, I'm Eric. I'm going to speak first. I will talk a little bit about the revenue proposals and how we did the scoring, which is a little different this year than in previous times. And Barry will talk about spending and the bottom line, which is debt. So first on the revenue proposals, they were very diverse, given ideologically diverse organizations. CBO is projecting a baseline that revenues would rise to 19.9% of GDP by 2049. That's a bit higher than it is now, a few points. And the reason for it's going up is a lot of it's bracket creep due to people moving into higher tax brackets with income growth. But another piece of it is the expiration of the tax cuts, the individual tax cuts that were enacted last year. All of the groups would raise at least that much money, but they cluster in terms of how much they would raise in different places. 4 of them, AEI, BPC, the Manhattan Institute, and American Action Forum, would raise between about 20 and 21% of GDP, so very close to or only slightly above the current projection. Progressive Policy Institute and Center for American Progress are kind of in the middle, within the mid-20s. And EPI is at the high end with 33% of GDP. So it's quite a difference in the extent to which groups would use revenue to solve our fiscal problems. However, it's worth pointing out that none of them would reduce revenues. So all of them would raise at least as much as currently is projected. The most interesting to me was the variety of structural changes. I will try to just give a few highlights, because if you think that the 2017 Act was the last thing in tax reform, you're wrong, at least as far as all of the thinking of all of these groups. They would all make fairly major changes. The top individual rates that are proposed range from 35 to 50%. That's slightly below the current 37 and is substantially above. And the corporates from 20 to 35. The current rate is 21. So again, here the tendency is to raise the rates, although some would lower, but only slightly. 6 groups proposed a carbon tax. I found that extremely interesting, given how controversial that is politically, but 6 of the 7 groups included that in their plans. All would change estate taxes, although in diverse ways. Some would reduce them or eliminate them. Some would increase them pretty dramatically. And a number of them would also end the step up in basis of capital gains at death, where those gains pass tax-free, but in different ways. A lot of cuts in tax preferences. The one thing I really want to highlight is, again, ideologically diverse groups are proposing eliminating or phasing out the mortgage interest deduction, which used to be kind of the third rail of tax policy. So I found that very interesting. There are a lot of other differences I won't go on to, but I just wanted to make the point, as you look at these plans, they are very, very big changes in the tax code, and it shows an awful lot of creative thinking and new ideas that are out there. Finally, I want to make a little bit of a note on the scoring. This is the first year when we've done these exercises where we've used so-called dynamic scoring. We always accounted for behavior in scoring, but usually assumed GDP, size of the economy was fixed. In this case, we allowed it to change, and TPC has developed a model which we use it. I just want to say a little bit about what's driving the numbers. In the short run, more spending, more taxes, increases demand for goods and services, pushes up the economy, so that has a positive effect on GDP to raise the deficit, but that effect is very temporary. Over a longer period of time, there are two effects going on. One, higher marginal tax rates on earnings or capital investments would tend to reduce labor supply, reduce capital formation, and therefore reduce growth. So that has a negative long-run effect on growth, raising taxes or certain kinds of taxes. And smaller deficits have a positive effect on growth, because the deficit reduction reduces interest rates, reduces a crowd in of capital, and leads to more capital investment. For some of the groups, these two effects worked in opposite directions. For others, they reinforce themselves. So let me just conclude that this was a very interesting exercise and a lot of very, very creative thinking, but a very diverse set of conclusions. I'll turn to Barry.
Thank you. I'd like to jump down to the bottom line here. I'm going to talk about spending a little bit, but I wanted to emphasize, and if you might pay attention to this chart for a second. I believe it was 8 months ago today, that is on October the 11th, we first met to kick off this project. I won't say that Eric and I were busy every single day since then, but gosh, we had an awful lot of interaction with the groups. And I can tell you that, at least speaking personally, I wasn't sure we would come up with a result like you can see in front of us. By that, if you can see that current policy line pushing debt held by the public to the 225% level, give or take, by 2049. I wasn't sure as we went through the process that we were going to see each of the 7 organizations have debt as low as it is. As you can see, it goes from as low as 24% by the AAF to up to 100% or so by CAP. Again, we went back and forth. There were a variety of interactions between both Eric and the groups and myself and the groups about how to score the proposals. And I can tell you how pleased I am when I finally saw this chart after realizing that they had managed to succeed in doing this. I emphasize this because where we're sitting now with such great policy differences, it was very good for me personally to see that 7 organizations with as wide of views as there are can come to this result and really get a better handle on our fiscal policies. That said, let me jump to the spending here a little bit. Just as Eric started out and said about revenues, there were wide differences in the spending proposals. However, I'll summarize them briefly because you're going to hear more from each of the organizations about them. differences really were in four major areas. By far, the biggest one was health care. Then there was Social Security. Then there was defense discretionary. And then there was everything else. Healthcare dwarfed everything else, and given its size and what you've heard even this morning about the importance of it, that's not at all surprising. The healthcare differences we had ranged from new programs from CAP, EPI, and PPI to make Medicare coverage more widely available, to AAF, AEI, and PPI proposing to modify Medicare and Medicaid costs through competitive bidding, while AEI also proposed to raise the eligibility age. BPC proposed promoting increased competition, and CAP and EPI proposed negotiating lower drug prices. There's a lot more detail, including one which has Medicare for all and another has Medicare Extra for all. They're going to describe those things in more detail, so I'm not going to go into that here. In Social Security, EPI and CAP would increase benefits, EPI substantially and CAP a little bit more modestly. The other 5 participants proposed some reduction in some benefits. All of the participants, except AEI, would raise additional revenues dedicated to improving the solvency by raising or eliminating the cap or payroll tax earnings. With respect to defense, while some of the organizations proposed increasing defense spending in the near term, and others proposed to decrease it, all 7 proposed defense spending by the end of the 30-year period at relatively similar levels. For non-defense spending, discretionary spending, BPC and MI proposed modestly higher levels. CAP, EPI, PPI proposed significant growth, with PPI proposing the highest level in 2049. AAF and AEI essentially proposed no growth or small cuts. CAP, EPI, and PPI proposed significant investments in other non-interest spending, including universal child care, early education, paid family and medical leave, and unemployment benefits. AAF, AEI, BPC, and MI proposed smaller changes, including reducing agricultural subsidies, and AEI and MI would reform federal pension programs and BPC housing finance. Again, you're going to hear more detail about it, but one thing I hope you can take from this is, given what Eric said, a very wide variety of proposals, both in the revenue area and in the spending area and in different areas of that. But still, this result, if I can pull it back up again, this result, in one sense, I think is a testimony to the real success of the project. 7 different groups, very wide proposals, but all of them proposing things that address our fiscal situation in one way or another. That's it.
Okay.